This is Sean from PowerScore RPG, and I have a special guest that I'm going to have a dungeon talk with today. This is Will Doyle. Will, thank you very much for being here.
Hey, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Will writes D&D stuff. In 4th edition, he wrote some stuff like the Stygian Mask, which is an adventure where he kind of fleshed out the Assassin Devils, which are very there's not a lot about them, but you actually made a whole adventure and you created all this stuff about them. It was really cool. And Will also did a lot of stuff for the Tomb of Annihilation, the current adventure. Did you do any other 5e stuff besides the Tomb?
Yes, I have done. I've written a load of stuff for the Adventurers League.
Was that you who did Peril at the Port?
I did, yes.
Oh, that's awesome, Captain Smoke.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I did Peril at the Port. I did Drums of the Dead, the most recent season 7 one. I've done a bunch of the epics. Going back to season 3, I think I've done the epic for almost every season since then. I've done a few Adventurers League modules. I did Outlaws of the Iron Root, Cloaks and Shadows, Mayhem in the Earthspur Mines. So yeah, a few stuff there. And I also worked on Storm King's Thunder.
You did?
Where I did I designed the maps of all of the giants' lairs for that, working with Chris Perkins.
You did all of the giant lairs?
I did, yes.
Oh
yeah, that was an interesting one. He got in touch with me because I'd worked on a bunch of Dungeon Magazine stuff with him, and I think his schedule was suddenly very, very tight, and he had to get a whole bunch of stuff written which he hadn't planned for. And he got in touch with me and said, "Hey, can you help out with some of these maps?" So yeah, I working to kind of briefs from him. I did the draft maps of all of the big giant lairs in that adventure.
My favorite one was the Frost giant one.
Yeah, the big ice. Yeah.
There's something I wanted to ask you about. When you're making dungeons and stuff like that for 5th, how much do you think about, because it seems like in 5th edition they try to keep it simple and not too much text. How much do you keep that in mind, where it's like, I just want a few pages where I just give a room and then a paragraph, maybe 2 of a description? Is that like in your head? Is that part of the focus style of 5th, or is that just how it comes out?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's. I think actually it's generally a good design guide for all editions. Is you try and use a bit of brevity. You try and keep it as short as you can, explain all that's needed without. It's very easy to kind of go down rabbit holes when you're writing adventures and kind of go, well, if this happens, then this happens, and if this happens, then this happens, and if this happens, and so on. Whereas you actually have to just leave quite a bit to the DM. And I think the 5th edition embraces that a little bit more. So I always try and keep, I always set myself rules. So I always try and keep, if possible, keep an encounter to like sort of about 800 words. Including box text and so on, and yeah, just provide what's needed to run it, and that's tricky. It's just I guess it's just something you kind of have to practice and get right over time. But I do think that 5th edition made it put it to the forefront in a way.
So Chris asked you to make the maps, right? But you didn't make the final map. The final map was by Mike Schley, right?
Actually in Storm King's Thunder, I think the final ones were,
Blando,
yeah, I
Jerry
think they may.
Blando. Yeah.
So yeah, I design the so he gets in touch with me. I
Hmm.
design a he gives me a brief,
Hmm.
so I get like 200 or 300 words off him of his ideas for it. But it's actually quite broad. You know, it's quite open to interpretation. So I draw a sort of a rough draft of it,
Hmm.
send that off to him, and then he comes back with modifications, and then I put together a sort of detail map,
Hmm.
which is pretty much what you see in the book, but just not as pretty. So that's for the cartographer to kind of you know wave their magic wand and make it look great.
You did the maps for Turtle Package, right?
I did, yeah. Those were my final ones, although it's not entirely me.
Hmm.
It's me and my fiance work together on it. So I do the design of it and the inking, and she does the colours. So
Oh.
she's an artist, a sort of freelance artist. She does sort of conventional art and collage and stuff. But she plays D&D. We've played D&D together for years,
Yeah.
and she yeah, so she jumps in and she makes it look pretty really at the end of it. So
I ran the Turtle Package. I think I just put the episodes up on YouTube, and there's that one room. I don't know how much you remember about it, but there's a room where if you go in, these two blocks of stone squish
yeah,
you,
yeah.
and the group, um, they got
So,
squashed. And it's like when you're reduced to zero, you're a pulp. You know, it's not like, oh, I'll just heal. No, you're reduced to a pulp. That's it. You're like you're dead. You know, and
oh
so
man, absolutely. There's yeah, that was me because it was left kind of quite open,
uh,
and I thought it was in spirit of the season to have some really nasty traps. So I drew that big crusher in. And it was also something I did in Tomb of Annihilation. That there's an interesting thing about traps, right? Because generally, when you get hit by a trap, you take a load of damage, um, and it ends up being a sort of speed bump. You know,
mhm,
it drains a bit of resources,
yeah,
um, and that's kind of it. Whereas I thought, again, in spirit of the season, it's kind of cooler to have if a trap reduces you to 0 hit points, it does something horrible to you. It kills you. It chops off a limb, whatever. So I sprinkled that kind of rule throughout uh, the Tomb of the Nine Gods, and there's a lot of traps like that. So I was quite pleased that I guess Chris took that on board and put it in the total package as well. So
yeah. That was a very fun adventure. There's also a part where there's the sunken ships, and the group
yeah,
had to go explore those. Those were really cool too. Although
yeah,
some of them, hey, oh, here's something I want to ask you about. Some of those ships were empty. There was nothing in them. How do you feel about? Because I don't know if you ever, like the original Castle Greyhawk. There's a lot of empty rooms, and some
uh,
people really like empty rooms, and some people think it's a waste of time. How do you feel about? Do you put empty rooms and locations in
no,
your?
I'm not a fan. So yeah, I've played a load of modules obviously over the years,
Uh,
and there are many which kind of go, okay, use this room as you please. And for me, that's not why I buy a module. I buy a module just to run it as is because I haven't got time to to sort of prep it
mhm.
properly. Um, and if I am going to tear a module apart and use different rooms, I will do that. But I don't like having blank rooms at all myself. So that's not my thing. Um,
Yeah, me either. It's just like, yeah, exactly. Like, I guess because the other thing is it wastes a lot of time at the table because the group
yeah,
doesn't. They're like, okay, wait, what's the deal with this room? They're like looking around, they search the whole thing, and it's like 15
absolutely.
minutes of wasted time on an empty room. It's
Yeah,
like and that's funny because when I was little, there was always a lot of talk about realistic. What's realistic? Why isn't there a bathroom in the dungeon? Why aren't there empty rooms? And it took me a long time to kind of realize that it's okay to, because we only have so much time, and realism. I mean, it's a game about dragons and stuff. Who, you know what I mean? You just
Well, no,
whatever. Like on a map, I'll just put like a spot. Be like, that's where they go to the bathroom or whatever. You know. Let's just go. Can we move on now? You know what I mean? Like they'll be like, if they go to bed, they gotta walk through the throne room. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's like I don't really care anymore.
no, I'm glad you said that, man. It's a really interesting subject. I think the idea of realism and kind of having a sort of ecology of a dungeon. Go to the bathroom because the players might go, we want to ambush somebody when they go to the bathroom. But if you have a more conventional dungeon where it's a little bit more guided through it, my experience is that players don't miss that. They don't miss, oh, hold on, where was the bathroom?
Mm-hmm.
What I do when I design dungeons is you're kind of looking for a purpose for each room, right? You're either going, this is going to be a combat encounter, or it's going to be a sort of skill challenge of some sort, or it's going to be part of the story of the dungeon. So I could understand you could have a kind of empty room, but as long as it's got a tapestry on the wall that explains a little bit of the backstory of the dungeon, players get it. They go, okay, that's cool, we learned something, move on. But if it's just a room with a bunch of tables and chairs, yeah, they will go down that rabbit hole and they'll start going, okay, we search around, we do this, we do that, and it's about having consistency, right? It's about going, if you put one room in like that, then players will kind of start expecting that, Whereas if you put a purpose to all of the rooms, players will behave like, okay, what is the purpose of this room?
So, okay. So with Tomb, what stuff did you make in the Tomb? Like what?
So my contribution was roughly, well, it was written primarily between me and Steve Winter.
Really?
And Steve. So Steve wrote the first few chapters. So he wrote Port Nyanzaru. And he wrote the whole exploration of Chult, the whole concept of Chult, yeah. And I wrote Omu and the Fane of the Night Serpent and the Tomb of the Nine Gods. So we sort of split it.
Wait, you did the whole Tomb?
Yeah.
Oh my God! You did the whole Tomb?
Well, okay, I did the draft of the whole Tomb. So all of this obviously came from Wizards of the Coast, and so they provided us with an awesome sort of story bible, which is a whole bunch of ideas for the whole thing, and so we had a lot to work from. We had a whole bunch of ideas, but certain areas were more developed than others. Like I guess the tomb itself was quite loose. So the idea of the trickster gods.
Mm-hmm.
And what each god did was detailed in the story Bible, and then there was, I guess, a bullet point list of 20 or so ideas for different rooms. Omu was very, very broad. It was kind of like, okay, it needs to have the shrines for the trickster gods, and you need to be able to get these cubes, to enter the tomb. And the Fane of the Night Serpent was even broader. It was just like, okay, there needs to be a Yanti temple underneath this place. It's really good. The way that they work is they leave a lot up to their writers. So yeah, I wrote Omu onwards.
Steve Winter wrote Port Nyanzaru and The Jungle, the whole thing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
man. And it was. I tell you, it was a real honor for me to work with that guy, because going back to when I first got into D&D, and especially when I was a teenager, I played a long campaign with a bunch of friends in a friend of mine's basement, and I played a psionicist from the old second edition handbook, and man, this campaign was massive. It went on for years, And yeah, he wrote that book, and so all the powers I was using, like, it was just him that did it. So it was a great opportunity to work with this guy.
My blog is called Power Score. A power score is from the Psionics Handbook when you roll the exact number you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I didn't realize. Absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah, because that's I when I was young, that's what we played was second. That was when we were kind of
Yeah.
coming up, and yeah, Psionics. They were Psionics didn't work really well with published adventures. I don't know if you because
No,
they didn't the authors didn't account for the psionic powers, and so they would
no,
just blow through that.
we were all back then. We were kind of very homebrew. You know, I was it
Mm.
wasn't me running it. I was obviously playing with a friend of mine who was a DM, and he made up his own whole city, and then very shortly the whole campaign was just based around our characters. You know, so it was very much tailored to us. And I remember us kind of modding the Psionics rules over time, but.
You did detonate. That was the one that we didn't read it right. I think you can only detonate inorganic items, but we missed that part, so we're just blowing people up. You know, it's like this
No,
seems really powerful.
we had, I think it was a Psionic disintegrate, where if you rolled a one or something on it, you would disintegrate yourself. And I remember a friend of mine rolling up. He played one of my followers, and he was this Psionic character, and he all his life was about getting the disintegrate spell, and then the very first time he used it, of course, he
Oh,
himself. But
yeah, that's
yeah,
brutal.
there was a lot of fun those books.
And he was in that game. Like, was he able? Were you able to raise him, or is he just gone for good when he
Nah,
got?
man, he was gone back then. Our DM was so stingy with money. You know, we didn't.
Really?
Yeah, and he dragged out leveling. You know, so each level would take us, you know, months to play. So
Oh,
it
okay.
was a long campaign. Went on for about, you know, God, 8 or 9 years. So
Wow, really? 8 or 9 years?
yeah, yeah.
My God. All right, so you did the whole tomb. That's crazy. Steve Winter is one of those names that, like, I don't know, always stuck. You know, like when I was a kid, you know, second edition, the names that always stuck with me was like Wolfgang Bauer,
Yeah.
Chris Perkins, because those are the names I saw in Dungeon Magazine, and I was very, you know, I was very into Dungeon Magazine. I would always stare at it, you know, and so certain names are kind of burned into my brain, like that guy Willie Walsh and Steve Kurtz, and like Steve Winter was one of those where it's like, oh, you know, so when, you know, it's funny, I
He,
saw his name in the credits, but I figured, yeah, he probably just, you know,
no, he did loads of them. Like I say, did half the book. But you know, it has to be said, he wrote the first half, I wrote the second half, and then of course we turn it over. You know, we chuck it over the wall, and it goes back to Watsy, and they do their bit. You know, so obviously the whole thing comes from you know, Chris Perkins's imagination, and he then took it and worked on it himself and made his own edits. And then, of course, it changes a load during playtests like that.
mm-hmm.
That particular module was, I think, one of the most playtested ones they've done. You know, if you look at the list of them, playtesters, it's huge. So it changed a lot going back through them. I remember I received a email from Chris Perkins saying that I've gone through. I think it was one of the lower levels of the tomb. It's like I've been through one of the lower levels of the tomb, and I've changed quite a lot because some of the encounters were too complicated or weird. And I was like,
Oh,
I feel like having that on a t-shirt. You know?
really?
Yeah. So I have a tendency sometimes to do weird encounters, and so
Can you
a load of them were cut.
do you remember any of the weird ones that got cut?
Yeah, man. There was one that, but there's loads of them. Some of them were kind of just modified to make them more sort of playable, I guess. But others were just taken out completely. And one of the ones that was taken out completely was to do with the company of the Yellow Banner, where at the bottom or near the bottom of the tomb, I think it ended up in the final book as being a mirror of life trapping.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the original draft I wrote, it was a mirror which would look back in time to the past of the tomb, but it was sort of live. You know, you'd look through it and you'd be looking back live into the past.
Mm-hmm.
And when you first come in there, it's held by a big four-armed gargoyle, and this gargoyle seems inert, and you look into the mirror and you see the door that you've just come through open, and walking in come this adventuring party. And of course, this is the bottom layer of the tomb. You've probably come across some of their corpses, you know, by this point. And you can talk to them, and they think it's a trap. They think it's, you know, this is some sort of illusion sent to trick them. And then you see the mirror from their perspective fall over, and the four-armed gargoyle leaps down and attacks them. They scatter away before you can kind of warn them about their own deaths. You know, I quite like that because I thought it was quite a nice kind of tying a bow in the end of that little story. But you know, I don't criticize why it was changed.
I think the room as it is now, it's more just each mirror has a different NPC. Some of them are nice, some of them are not nice. You know,
it's more manageable. I think any generally, and I understand why an editor would look at something to do with time travel in any sense and would go, get rid of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a part where you could look into the past of one room. I think it was Aijin's Shrine, where you look in and you can see the dwarf Bravus Boulderborn. He actually see how he dies.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my, because the company of the Yellow Banner are it was fun for me because they're my 4th edition adventuring group, a bunch of players I play with them. Bravus Boulderborn is my fiancee's character. She plays a dwarf, so it's a point of humour for us because her character is a psionic as well, and is really good at what's the word? You know, like casting her eye out and kind of looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And there is no way that Bravus would have died in that trap. He could have cast his vision behind him and mm-hmm. seen the riddle for it.
So are you still running that campaign?
Yeah, we are. We have been playing since I think as soon as the 4th edition Player's Handbook was released, we started playing with.
Whoa, 2008.
Yes, yeah. As soon as it came out, because I remember they released Keep on the Shadowfell before they released the core books, and we started playing as soon as the first core book came out, and we have been playing ever since. Like we started playing really regularly. It was one of those perfect moments where we had a whole bunch of us all worked for the same company, and we started playing on a Friday night, and it was weekly for a long time, and so I slowed the advancement right down because we were just playing so much. But then, you know, it's been years and life changes and people have moved away and people have had children and so forth. So now we only meet every 6 months or so. We're still playing.
What level are they now?
They've just turned, the other week, they've just turned 19th.
So they're about to hit the epic tier.
They are, and yeah, we'll see. I think because of how often we meet, we may not be able to play through the whole epic tier. I might wrap things up in the next few years.
You wrote a 4th edition adventure, right? A high level one with the tomb that on the rollers. Is that right?
Yeah, the rolling tomb.
Yeah, the rolling tomb, right? You gonna run them through that?
I might do actually. Yeah, that's like I hadn't thought of that. I've run them through a couple of the ones I've written. I wrote an adventure called Tears of the Crocodile God, which mm-hmm. I took that group through that. So maybe once we get to that.
What's the deal? Okay, okay. I have a million things. All right, first, so there's one guy who dies. I think on the 2nd level of the tomb. I'm going to ask you really nerdy, nitpicky questions here. So
okay, good. Yeah,
so there's like a Sonic the Hedgehog loop, right?
Yeah.
And obviously this whole show has spoilers for the tomb, everybody. So just turn it off. So when you go in the loop, once you get to the top part, you vanish. Well, you walk into a mirror tomb, right? So lying on the side of that loop is this goat guy, Devlin Bashir. Is that his name?
That's it. Yeah,
And he has a staff of striking that's
yeah.
cursed. So I just want to know, is he like that in real life? Is that his deal in the game, or is that something you made
Yeah,
up?
absolutely. He's that's a long running kind of arc in our fourth edition campaign that they needed to. What adventure we were playing? It was Pyramid of Shadow,
Oh yeah, okay, yeah,
and you have to kill
that's funny.
this guy whose name escapes me now.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, the main villain
There's
of
a
that
million of them or
adventure.
something, right? There's like a whole bunch of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's some tiefling guy.
Hmm.
Anyway, I modified that adventure a lot when I played it to fit the campaign. And part of it was I wanted to do a little bit of sort of plan our travel. So I said that in order to kill him, they had to get weapons from different planes. So they had to go to the Shadowfell and get a weapon, and they had to go to the Astral Sea and the Elemental Chaos and so on.
Wow.
And so that we did this kind of like astral jaunt adventure,
Mhm.
and we went to the Astral Sea, and there was it was really funny because it was one of those ones where I hadn't prepared it fully, and I sort of just ended up kind of ad libbing it a little bit. And
Wow.
they went to this weird island, and they met this guy who was a goat herd, um, and he had this staff, and
Hmm.
they saved him from some Githyanki pirates,
Hmm.
and he ended up giving them this staff. It's like, there you go, that's my prize. And the wizard took it. And then it was only when they got back to the material plane that they realized that this guy had kind of tricked them, and that the staff was cursed, and
Hmm.
over time would turn you into a goat. And the only way to get rid of this was to give it to someone else. And Devlin, being a good character, has never been, never wanted to give somebody else this staff. And also, it's really powerful, so he kind of wants to keep it for himself. Um, and yeah, when we first introduced it, I wrote up this quite sort of complicated set of rules whereby he'd have these cards, like the player would actually physically have these cards where whenever he took a rest, he'd draw a card and it would tell him how goatee he got, so he got sort of sprout,
Hmm.
once he start bleating and his hair would suddenly get all curly,
Uh,
um, and the only way that he could reduce its effects was by turning into an actual goat for a certain amount of time, and then that would buy him time as a human, So
hmm.
we played that for a while, and then now his character has managed to find a sort of potion that he has to drink regularly, which keeps the goatiness at bay. But it's funny because he still bleats now and again.
That's fun. In my game, the half orc monk, got that staff, and it's about to kick in. I think it's over
Like,
the course of 3 days. It happens, right? So
yeah.
it's gonna kick in the next time we play. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. What about the awakened lizard? Was that part of your game?
That is so weird. That is so weird because no, that isn't part of my game, and that isn't part of. That's so funny that you mentioned that because it's not part of my game, and it's not something I wrote. Yeah, that was edited into it, but it mentions that it's part of the company, the Yellow Banner. But Bravus, my fiance's character, has got a thing for lizards, and so I had no idea how they got it, But there's Bravus has always got various lizards when he does these rituals. He has like a box of lizards and he pulls one out. So it was uncanny.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my groups found that too. They named him Frank. So I just wanted to know, like, so he was okay. So he was friends with Bravus, right?
Uh,
Because I'm using him to kind of, I like to use NPCs to kind of fill the PCs in on stuff they should know, or you know what I mean, or just and help. Like I can talk through the NPC,
no,
just
sure,
just to save time. Like
absolutely. Well, that's kind of one of the purpose of possessing spirits as well, doesn't it? It gives you a good opportunity to kind of jump in and say something.
Hmm.
But with the company Yellow Banner, there was a few other little ones which I think some of them were edited out. There was you find this letter when you're in Omu
Hmm.
from Lord Brixton
Hmm.
to a character called Rue, and Rue is also one of that fourth edition group.
Hmm.
Um, but you never know. In the book Tomb of Annihilation, you never figure out what happens to her. And he says to her at the end of that letter, "Blow your horn if there's any danger or something." And I wrote that when you go to the lair of the King of Feathers,
Hmm.
you find a mangled old horn in one
Oh.
of its droppings.
Oh.
But they edited that out, which I was like, I thought that was a bit sad.
Oh.
That's what happened to Rue. She got eaten.
Oh. So wait, Rue is one of the heroes of the company.
She is in the detail of it is that Brixton is played by a friend of mine called Sandy,
Hmm.
and and he retired Brixton after he kind of got he played him as much as he could, and he brought in a new character called Rue, so
Hmm.
it's actually the same player's character.
Hmm. That's crazy.
But yeah, they're called the company Yellow Banner because Brixton is a warlord, and he had a big halberd
Hmm.
with this kind of yellow pennant on it.
Hmm.
And when they played Keep on the Shadowfell, just before they were going to take on Calarel, before they went into that fight, they all said, "Oh, look, we'll tear a little bit from the pennant and wrap it around our arms," and so they became the company Yellow Banner.
Wow, that's really cool. Um. All right. So there's one. Okay. Actually, I have a million questions. You did the. I can't believe you did the whole tomb. That is insane. Oh, hey, good. I can get advice from you. Okay. It's the most selfish interview ever. All right, Will Doyle is going to help me with my campaign. It's going to be great. All right, everybody. So in my game, at the bottom of the staircase, all the way down the center, there's the four-armed gargoyles, each on a pedestal, right?
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of groups in the tomb at the same time. So one of them disturbed one of the gargoyles, and then they did a whole bunch of stuff that I kind of had to make a judgment call. Because it's like I think you have to damage the plinth or something to get the other gargoyles to move around. But they created a storm, and there's all these coins everywhere. So the coins are flying around, hitting the plinths and the gargoyles, and I'm like, I think that would animate them. But what I did just to try to be fair, because the group was going to get slaughtered by all four, was I had three of them be disoriented and fly up and perch on a higher level just for a round before they came back down. So the group had a chance to run or just
Sure.
whatever, which they did. So now I have this. Oh, okay, good. And this might just be my bad reading comprehension. So those three gargoyles, their plinths aren't damaged, right? Would they just land back on the plinths and turn back to stone unless somebody put a coin in? Or are they when they're disturbed from their plinth, are they loose permanently? I guess
No,
that's what I want to know.
that's not how I imagined it. Yeah, I imagined that they'd go crazy, they'd do their business, they'd kill anyone they can see,
Hmm.
and then yeah, they go back, they get kind of reset.
Okay, well, one's plinth is destroyed, so
Mm.
would it still go back to stone?
Uh, yeah, that's an interesting question. I imagine it would wait next to the plinth until a tomb dwarf came along to repair it. If you haven't introduced withers, that would be a good time.
Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Is it
Withers, they've almost killed him twice.
right?
Uh, and in the Mirror Tomb, they fought Mirror Tomb Withers too. So what I was gonna do was have Withers round up those four gargoyles because I have all these groups camping in the tomb, and I
Right.
haven't bothered them at all. And it's like we're in the
Yeah.
tomb taking a long rest all the time. It doesn't, you know, not something should happen. And so this makes sense that Withers would be like, all right. Oh, here's another great question I have. So once they go into that room where the tomb dwarves are making the tomb guardian, and they trash that room, right? And they
Right.
chase Withers off. Where So if Withers can't go back there, where does he go? Like, what does he do? Does he have a
Well,
backup? And how many Tomb Dwarves and Tomb Guardians are? Because in the book it says whenever you need a Tomb Guardian, just use it and throw it at them when it feels right. But it's like, well, where? Okay, how many are there? Where are they coming from? You know what I mean? Like, how I'm having a hard time figuring
um,
that out.
sure. No, it's kind. I would play that quite loosely. There's as many as you need them to be.
Okay.
Um, where they would go, there's a number of options, I guess. I guess Withers would go as deep as possible, so he'd probably go down to the kind of the cog level, where there are some more kind of secret bits, the bottom of the staircase, that area. He would
Right.
try and reclaim
Oh,
his
okay.
office.
Okay.
One of the things I quite liked that because Withers, was one of the NPCs that was in the story Bible. That was really awesome. But when I wrote that section, I was trying to think, what does this guy do? He's a white, but whites are quite intelligent, and he's bound to a Serac, so he's there stuck in this tomb. So I imagined him as a kind of a scientist in a way, where he's fascinated by what's happening in the outside world, and he's a botanist, and he's looking for rare plants and rare animals and stuff. So when he meets the characters, they're one of the first opportunities he's had in a long time to really speak to people who've come from other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's got in that room represents a load of his studies.
Mm-hmm.
That's years of accumulated information, and he'd want it back. And if the characters had trashed it, he'd be very, very upset. So,
Yeah, they rifled through all his stuff, took
yeah,
everything, and
poor Withers, man. He has a hard lot.
I've always had a hard time with that in dungeons. The element of like patrols,
Mm,
guards, and in general, when you run a dungeon, especially in Storm King, actually, there's like if there's an alarm, it's like this big chart. These guys go over here. These guys go over here. These guys go over here. And I'm looking at it. And I'm like, I can't do that. I just can't do that
no,
during the game. I'm not gonna be able to remember that or
mm,
depict it accurately. And that's always been a hard thing for me in dungeons is like it's one thing
yeah,
if they're all static. It's another thing if like you've got roamers because it's like what's fair? That's what I struggle with.
yeah,
Like in this
sure.
case when I have all these Tomb Guardians at my disposal and it's like, well, I mean, I could just say 20 of them go, it's like what's fair? And I guess that's where the dice come in when you don't know, you let the dice
Yeah, there's
decide.
there's, there's I think so. A number of things there. One thing I think is that I quite liked personally was fourth edition, where they in some adventures structured their dungeons where it wasn't so much about here's a room and what's in it. It's here's a kind of a zone. Here's a bunch of rooms connected together,
That's
and that's
right.
an encounter. And it's about that set of rooms is balanced for whatever level you're playing at, and that's great fun because you can go, okay, you're just looking at this one little section, and if the alarm is triggered here, then these guys are going to come over, and you actually run it live as a combat.
Right.
Um, I guess in fifth edition, it has gone, as with many fifth edition things, back to the kind of old school of D&D,
Hmm.
where balance is a little bit less important, because players are maybe expected to run a bit more. So in Storm Kings, if you take the wrong approach, you're up against 20 giants,
Hmm.
and you're dead.
Hmm.
Um, and that's in its own way quite cool. I think that it's tough because certain players may not have that kind of mentality, and they may think that everything's is going to be balanced for them, and so they will
Yep.
just fight until they die.
Hmm.
But so I guess if you explain it a bit more, either just straight out front saying, some of these encounters will kill you unless you run, um, or you just offer them a bit more leeway, give them more of an opportunity to get away.
You could always just say they capture you instead of kill you. Right.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, that seems to happen all the time in my games. There's a lot of capturing going
Oh, really?
on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's.
I've been playing at my work with a bunch of guys, some of whom have played a load, others of whom are really new to role playing, and they have split the party again and again and again and again.
Really?
And so yeah, they've been captured a number of times.
So that work game, that's a 5th edition game?
Yeah, yeah.
What level are they?
I've got a couple of groups. There's a
You have a
group
couple of groups at work?
yeah, yeah. I have a lunchtime game and a evening game. Some of them are the same players, but
Where?
all of
How do you? When do you work?
I'm lucky like that. But
That's
they,
awesome.
yeah, some of them we played through Lost Mines of Fandelver,
Oh.
and we're now rolling that into Storm King's Thunder. So
Oh.
they're level 5 now, I think. And the other group are playing super secret playtesting stuff. So.
Ooh, that is really cool. That's awesome. So you're gonna move them into Storm King, right? So in the early part of Storm King, it's kind of like you kind of have to choose one of 3 locations, right? I mean, you don't have to, but that's kind of how it's set up. Is there one that you want them to go to, or are you gonna let them just pick?
Man, they ignored it completely. So you get to the end of that first section, and I modified it slightly so that I think in Storm King's Thunder you start off in Nightstone, don't you? And I changed that so it was when they returned to Phandalin, they discovered that the giants had attacked that town, and they already had a bunch of connections with people in that town. But when the guy says to him, "We need you to deliver, we need you to go and tell the relatives of people here that their relatives have died, and we'll give you some gold if you go and deliver these messages." I laid out those options for them, and they ignored all of them. They were like, "No, we're not your errand boys. We're not going to do that." I said, they did not take one hook. They were like, "We're going to Waterdeep." Bye.
That's D&D, right?
Yeah. They were. Not only did they not take the hooks, they were insulted by the hooks.
No, I get it. I remember when I read that one, I was like, "Yeah, that is a little." It's a little flimsy. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy.
So they've gone off. What's his name? Glassstaff, the villain in or one of the villains in Lost Mines. He escaped in our campaign, so he's out there, and they want to get this guy. So all of the other hooks have gone out the window, and they're just trying to carry on that story. So.
I think from Dice Camera Action, Anna Prosser Robinson started running the Lost Mines on Misclicks, and I had run just a part of it a long time ago at the game store, and I ran the Goblin Caves. I believe in the caves, there's like this dam that could get broken open, and like the water washes through the whole cave. When you ran it, what did that bust open?
Oh, they got caught in that. There was a whole bunch of them got washed away by that. And then I think there's another. They set it off again later. There's
twice, really?
But, no, that's crazy. When we before we got to that, like that adventure starts with an ambush on the road by these goblins. And at the end of the ambush, they realise that possibly one of the guys that hired them has been dragged away by goblins to these caves. But they've been told to deliver this wagon load of stuff to the town. And I think most groups would go, "Okay, we'll go to the goblin caves and we'll rescue this guy." But my group said, "All right, 3 of us will go to the Goblin Caves, and 2 of us will go into town." So, count of 1, they split the party.
Oh no!
And that was the beginning of a number of party splitting events.
Did they survive the cave? They survived though, huh?
They did. The guys that went to town didn't. That was one of the. Because in town you've got the Red Browns, the sort of gangsters that kind of running this place. And yeah, they went and got into a fight, and they got beaten unconscious, and then dragged into the Red Brand hideout, and they managed to escape there. But yeah, it was, and then the people in the Goblin Caves had a tough time of it, but
Oh yeah.
managed to kind of scrape through.
Yeah, I ran it for a bunch of kids and they just barely survived, you know. This is
Awesome.
the Goblin Caves, you know what's cool about Fifth is they took like they took like a generic like goblins in a cave, right? That's pretty generic and boring if you've been playing D&D for a while. But they took like these kind of classic tropes and made it interesting. Like I would have never thought of the water part. I think that makes the whole dungeon really cool. Is that water part that it comes out? It's like very unique, but
Yeah,
makes sense, you know? And
yeah, totally. I think there's a lot to be said for that adventure. It's obviously, it can consistently recommended by people, but I think it does some clever design stuff. It's built around this kind of almost sort of video game like hub, where you go to the town and you get offered quests, and
mhm.
I guess a lot of people kind of attune with that, but it's also very very open, so you can run it in all sorts of different ways. And the dungeons are very very clever. There's um, you know the, it's not linear at all. There's you can kind of go, in that Goblin Cave,
Mhm.
one of the first rooms you go in, there's a load of wolves, and you can kind of creep up through the back of that cave and get into one of the final boss rooms. So
Yeah.
there's interesting ways around it. It's not structured like some dungeons where you kind of all go through the same set of rooms. It's very open.
Seems like a smart way to
Yeah, I
make an
think that
adventure is kind of like a Metal Gear Solid approach where you can when you're making it like you can go okay if they go in guns blazing, you know, but also if they stealth or if they talk, if you can kind of keep all of those things in mind, I think it makes it better. Does that
it
sound
does.
right?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that certainly taking into account, yeah, the okay, you've got the going loud and you've got the sneaking in, and how does the adventure work if you tried those two? Is certainly something I think of. I guess one of the things I always try and do with dungeons is create a kind of puzzle for the whole dungeon, and I think that even the simplest dungeons can benefit from this. That you go, well, in order to complete it, you have to do something which is solved across a number of rooms. You know, so
I mean like in level 3 of the tomb where you got to get the 10 gems.
yeah, yeah, or the tomb as a whole, where you have
Yeah.
to get the
Skeleton
skeleton
keys.
keys. Um,
Did you come up with those?
no, the skeleton keys were part of the story Bible.
Uh,
But what I did do was, in the design of the tomb, I made it so that you could go through that central staircase. You could go right to the bottom level and start playing there. And I wanted something where you could kind of really jump around a lot. But obviously, in order to get to the end, you need those keys. But those keys can turn up in different places. So you don't, in one playthrough, you might have gone through these amount of rooms. In another playthrough, you'll experience a different set. But you certainly, at each level, see a bit of that level.
as a DM, it's like hard. You guys leave it open to the DM to decide which room the key is in on each level. And like as a DM, it's kind of hard because I want them to experience most of the tomb. So I kind of feel like I'm almost like I'm not giving it to you until you're done with this level, you know, because I want them to go through the rooms because it's fun, you know.
Yeah,
And I
and I
mean,
think I think that's fair. It's like the room with, or the level with the beholder on.
uh-huh.
I guess most DMs would put the
Yeah,
key in there.
yeah, right.
Um,
That room, they're gonna get there soon, and I'm really alarmed about that. I mean,
yeah,
that
that's
seems
a
like they're all gonna die. I'm worried that they're just all gonna. Well, I don't know. I do want them to get to the bottom because the bottom room is cool. But
yeah,
so far they've been
that's
doing actually three people died so far, and like
good.
I just part of me is like, oh, that's good, and part of me is like, oh, that's bad. Like I want somebody to get all the way to the bottom.
Sure.
I don't. It's weird. I don't want it to be too easy, and I don't want it to be too hard. But it's really tricky to get the balance of like they fought the zombie barfing Tyrannosaurus Rex,
Mm.
and I thought they were all gonna die, but I rolled a couple of ones, and they went nuts on it, and turned into an octopus and started wrestling it and stuff, and it was like they survived, and it was like maybe they're all just gonna make it all the way to the bottom, and I was kind of like that doesn't feel right for them all at this point to make it. But there's the one part, okay, as far as the skeleton geese go, I think on level 4, there's this real secret. Yeah, there it is. And they're right at that part now. So there's a hallway, and at the end of it is the devil face with the lizard in it, right? And there's a secret passage on the side where you go through the 4 elemental chambers.
Yeah.
I'm like, when I read that, I'm like, they're all gonna die when they go in there, right?
Yeah, that is really, really tough. And that's a kind of, I guess, a slightly more old school bit of a dungeon, and it's very, very deadly. So
so then it's like, do I put the skeleton key in the room beyond those? It felt like that's what I should do, because that room is really cool with all the warriors and stuff.
Yeah, no, I had fun with that one.
But it's like I'm handing them like a death sentence, that's how it feels. And it's so hard. It's like, what's fair, But I want them to, I just feel like I kind of have to do it.
It's a really tricky one. But one of the things with that whole adventure that I think is challenging for a DM is if you start from the very, very beginning and you have a group and you adventure all the way through the jungles and you build up your own stories and you have an awesome time, and then you get to this mega dungeon at the end that just crushes you, that's really nasty. It's really, really tough. So I guess when I've run a campaign a couple of times now.
Oh, really?
And I always try and emphasize, right at the start that it's deadly. And in the jungle, I will go by the dice, and I'll make sure that there's, if they come across a load of really deadly dinosaurs, that's it. They will get attacked and they will suffer casualties and they will have to run. And so you emphasize all the way through that this is deadly. Mm-hmm. But even so, when I was writing it, I was still very worried about that. Mm-hmm. So I put in some tools for DMs to kind of get around it a little bit. So, and this is sort of massive spoilers, but the Sewn Sisters are creating kind of clones mm-hmm. of characters. So I figured that if you had a story-invested group, and you got all the way to the dungeon, and you had the same characters since you laid foot in Chult, and you died to one of these horrible traps, you could bring that character back by having them kind of stumble around the corner, and they're one of these clones, and it's the same guy, and he's kind of got the same memories, so you can carry on that story. And that made it through to the final edit, and I guess
And there's also Nanny Poo Poo, right, out in
there is Nanny Poo Poo,
which is a cool setup. The thing about that one is she's so far away, so it's like when you die in the tomb, you're gonna go all the way there and come all the way back. That's kind of the part where it's like, but with those, I love the doubles. I plan on making like demented versions of the heroes that they're nice, but they're like all messed up, and the group can be like, "Oh my god, like get away from me," and they're like, "Don't you remember me?" They're gonna be like, "Please leave me alone."
I like it.
Especially if it's like a dead character, and now he's back, but he's like, raw,
There was one bit that I put in there, which I don't know was ever really picked up on, but when you find Devlin's letter, he says that they're suspicious that there's a doppelganger. Mm-hmm. So if a character, the intention there was to have a bit of paranoia that if a character dies, and then you come across this other character, you're like, whoa, hold on, you're a doppelganger. And one of the bits I put in that was edited out was you come across at the bottom of the waterfall. In the original draft, you come across one of your own party, like dead and rotten, at the bottom of the waterfall, which was just to confuse you, you know. So and that's one of the clones that's escaped but didn't make it out.
Oh,
And
that's a good idea.
so I think there's just something very cool about rolling a body over and it's you.
Yeah, they should have. It's only like 2 sentences. They could have kept that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a good. I'm going to use that. That's a good idea. Oh, so the Starfallen. There's the Ghost
Mm,
Lantern, and
mm,
in it is like this entity. And you had said the Starfallen is from your campaign, right?
that's true. Yeah, it's an interesting. It is from my campaign,
Uh-huh.
but it's a slight merging of different things from my campaign. So
Yeah.
in my campaign, the character who is called Svard in our campaign, they changed his name in the final edit to Seward, um, and you come across him he's being turned into a tomb guardian when you come across him in the book,
Mm-hmm.
and he carries this ghost lantern, and in my campaign, Svard carries this ghost lantern with the spirit of this girl who is actually the daughter of Vecna, and she's
Oh.
Aoni and is a separate character. The Starfallen is one of the player characters in the campaign, and she is an Eladrin called Deer, and she is part of a sort of clan or a sort of a line of witches. So it's sort of the eighth daughter of an eighth daughter born under a certain sign becomes the Starfallen, and the Starfallen is created to prevent the gods from meddling too much in the ways of man. And because there are a number of Starfallen that have been around since the beginning of creation, and each of them has the power inside them to destroy a god. But in doing so, they also destroy themselves, and then until the next Starfallen is born. So in our campaign, this is a huge storyline, you know, and it's and one of the players is the Starfallen. But in the Tomb of Annihilation, I modified that quite a lot, and it's to do with the company of the Yellow Banner trying to bring this Eladrin spirit back.
So she's a daughter of Vecna?
No, that's the confusion. The Ghost Lantern in my campaign contains the spirit of the daughter of Vecna.
Yeah.
And that's not the Starfallen. The Starfallen is an actual character.
I see.
But when I wrote it,
you mushed them together.
Yeah, I mushed them together.
So who's the mother?
The mother of
the Starfallen.
Oh,
in your game.
Yeah, that's a long story. I'll try not to go down. And
wow. Okay.
But the character Brixton in my campaign is Brixton is a name he's given himself, and he's called Lord Aloysius von Rotrand, and he comes from this long line of evil villains, of sort of tyrants. And he ran away from this when he was a kid, and he joined the army, and he gave himself a new identity. And the early part of our campaign was exposing the fact that this warlord they had with them had this terrible background, and it turned out that he had held the Starfallen's mother, or his father had held the Starfallen's mother as a slave. It's kind of servant. So he'd grown up as a child knowing the young Starfallen. So they had a connection together.
That's awesome. He's a warlord, Brixton. So does he have those powers where I made a warlord in 4th, and I loved giving other people like basic attacks, and you dump a bunch of bonuses on him. Does he do that kind of thing a lot?
Yeah, no, he does loads, and
it's fun.
And they all have awesome names as well. There's one power he uses, which is called Platinum Blood Smite, which I always think most ridiculously awesome. And whenever he uses it in our game, it's like Platinum Blood Smite. Uh,
That sucks when it doesn't work, right?
yeah,
Oh, how could it?
well, drat.
All right, all right. We've done an hour. I don't want to torture you too much. I want to see if I can. I have. Let's see. I'll see if I can pick your brain about the final. Oh, okay. You probably, maybe you can't tell me. What's the deal with Mr. Fox? I keep thinking like, do I know this guy from somewhere? Like the spoilers, Iga Roxig. Like, I'm like, God, I could have sworn I saw this somewhere, but maybe I didn't. What is the
No,
deal with this guy?
I,
What is?
I do not know
Okay.
because that one was the character was there in the draft I did, but it's been modified. So
Oh.
there's something going on there, but
Ah. Okay. So, and there was also one thing I really liked about the Tomb. Right at the very end, you have a hallway, just like in the beginning of the Tomb of Horrors. I think that's a freaking great idea. I'm like, old timey players are gonna be like, whoa, hey. New
yeah,
timey players won't know, but it might be pointed out to them at some point, and it's just like, this is some badass stuff. So the final encounter, I was looking at Asarak, and like, so they're gonna fight the Atropal, and then they're gonna have to fight Asarak, and I'm like
mm,
looking at Asarak with his 9th level spells, and
yeah,
I'm like, oh my god, I don't know. I mean, but one thing I was thinking, I got to look this up. Time stop, right? I'm like,
yeah,
once I think you hurt somebody, the time goes back to normal.
yeah,
But so what I was wondering, this is a rules thing I can look up. So he's got the Sphere of Annihilation, time stop. He could just Sphere of Annihilate somebody, right? I mean,
yeah.
you know. And so it's like I'm thinking about stuff like that, and I'm like, how are they gonna live? How are we gonna do this? You know what I mean?
It's that's a it's an interesting encounter because how you play that guy, just exposes how cruel you are as a DM. Really, he has at his disposal a lot of nasty stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but that's what the spirits are there for. They're there to kind of balance that out a bit.
Hmm.
Um, but
That's true with the boons and stuff.
yeah, yeah. So if they've gone through and they're when I played out, I would bring the spirits out to kind of do their thing as
You
soon as
you said you ran this twice, right?
I've run it once
Ran it one.
in playtest,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and I'm midway through two campaigns.
In the playtest, how'd they do? Did they make it? Did they live?
The playtest was really weird because we didn't play it like
Oh.
a whole adventure. It's kind of like here's an encounter, here's an encounter, here's an
Oh.
encounter.
Okay.
So it's a bit more disjointed.
Hmm.
But and so we didn't test that,
Hmm.
as with a bunch of characters that come all the way through the tomb.
Hmm.
We just it gets a little bit mechanical, in a playtest where you're just going,
Oh.
okay, chuck some dice, see what happens.
I see.
Um,
Still, that's pretty cool to be part of that kind of thing. That seems like a very
yeah.
cool. So what about your group you're running now? Where are they now?
So I've got two groups. One
God.
of whom I haven't played with for ages.
Uh-huh.
We just haven't had time. But that group's in Omu, having come all the way through. And the other group I have, it was funny. They went to Naranzaru. They got guides. They got all their supplies for the jungle. They got absolutely spent ages sorting it all out, going into the jungle, and then they were like, "Oh, we need to get a charter of exploration." So they went to Fort Valerian. They got the charter of exploration,
Hmm.
and then on the way back, they got attacked by pirates, and they got captured and taken all the way around to Jahako Anchorage,
Anchorage. Yeah.
which they managed to escape. And then they ended up in the jungle with nothing, So
I love the bar there.
yeah, that was fun. I like that. That was one of the things that was fun about working on that adventure was the way we did it was quite interesting. Where I did all of the maps for the adventure. So I designed the Jahako Anchorage and
You did
Port.
all the maps?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a million of them.
apart from there's two.
Look at that.
Yeah,
You did all that?
that's Great Britain upside down. The
What?
Omu. It's the little my little touch on Omu. So
Really?
if you turn the city of Omu upside down, its overall shape is Great Britain.
That's crazy.
The
This is the best interview of my life.
the Yeah, I did the draft maps for the whole adventure, with the exception of the big map of Chult and of the Grung place,
Mm-hmm.
Dung Glung, whatever it's called.
Adam Lee did that, right?
He did that one.
Yeah, I saw that was on Dragon Plus. Okay, I don't want to. We've gone a long
Yeah,
time, so
we should talk again. This has been fun.
I could talk forever. All right, but first let me just thank everybody for watching Dungeon Talk with my special guest
Awesome.
Will Doyle. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Tomb is awesome. It's really good.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I mean, you made the Tomb. You're like, that's a feather in your cap forever.
Absolutely. No, it was an honor and a pleasure. Yeah.
You know what's funny? It's like, I know where to. These 5th edition is so hugely popular, right? And I think more people are experiencing the Tomb and Curse of Strahd than most adventures ever, even except the 1st edition ones, which were just huge, everybody. So it's like I think that the Tomb is going to be remembered, similar to, maybe even bigger, because we have all the recordings of it.
Yeah.
In the end, so like you're gonna be like famous, you're gonna be like.
I'm very, very, very grateful for the opportunity to work on that, and it's amazing sitting at home. I'm on the way to work, and I look on Twitter or whatever, and I see somebody's made some awesome diorama of one of these locations, and it's like, man, I drew that, and now somebody's doing it. Or I hear stories from yourself or from other people.
You know what? Most people aren't even in the Tomb yet, so you haven't even gotten to the really good stuff yet. I can't wait for people to get in there. I want to hear about it. I want to see it.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're gonna sign out. Thanks everybody.
Cool.
Tomorrow I'm gonna be running Tomb of Annihilation at 6:30. My regular Tomb group will be in there. This will actually be Val's first shot inside the Tomb. We'd actually stopped last time with the 4 gargoyle thing, but now I think I have a handle on it, so we can proceed from there. And then Sunday, I'm running Dungeon Academy with the beginners. And what I've already learned from the beginners is that if you watch Dice Camera Action, you are a very good D&D player right off the bat, because they're all awesome. They know what they're doing. It's fantastic. So everybody should check that out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye.